Welcome to Section 4 of our course on Learning Windows Server 2019, Managing Storage. This is Video 1, Choosing the Right Partition Table Format and File System.
All right, thank you, Josh. We'll start out in the Server Manager to create the first of our two volumes. So in the navigation pane on the left, we'll click on File and Storage Services, and then Disks. Now as you can see, we have two disks, 2 and 3, that have an unknown partition type. So we'll right-click on Disk 2 and click on Initialize. Now this gives us a note to erase the disk and initialize it as a GPT disk, and that we need to back up any data if there is any. Now configuring it as a GPT disk gives us access to several new features, such as a more robust disk through the use of redundant partition tables, volume sizes larger than 2 terabytes, and in fact all the way up to 18 exabytes, and supports more than 4 partitions, which is a limitation of the older MBR disks. One thing to note though is that you do need to use a UEFI firmware, as the traditional BIOS doesn't support GPT disks. So, to continue, we'll click Yes, and there we are, we're configured as a GPT disk. So now that disk 2 is initialized, let's flip over to the Disk Management console to configure our other disk as an MBR disk. Now we have to use the Disk Management console to initialize our disk as MBR, as the Server Manager will only let you configure it as a GPT disk. So first, we'll right-click on Disk 3 and click Initialize Disk, and when the dialog pops up, we're given a choice between GPT and MBR. Now you might need to choose MBR for some legacy requirements, but it does come with a few limitations and has some requirements, such as being limited to 2 terabytes and support for only 4 partitions. Now PCs running the BIOS must use the MBR, whereas PCs running UEFI can run the MBR or GPT disks. And if you're using UEFI, you can't use an MBR disk as your primary disk. So, with all those notes, we'll select MBR and click on OK. So, now that both of our disks are initialized, let's get some volumes created. And we'll flip back over to the Server Manager. Now we want to create an NTFS partition so that we can get some benefits, such as access control lists for file security, support for up to 16 terabytes, and file system compression, amongst others. So in the Volumes pane at the bottom, we need to click on To create a new volume, start the new volume wizard. Now on this page, you need to review the notes on the before you begin, and if you don't want to be reading this each time, just click on the Don't Show This Page Again, and then click Next. Now on the Select the Server and Disk page, we need to select Disk 3 and click Next. Now we can specify a size for our volume on this page if we don't want the full space used, but I think we'll create a single volume on this disk using all of the free space. Now we can assign a drive letter at this point, and just to be a little corny, I think I'm going to choose N for NTFS. Now you could optionally mount it as a folder on a different drive if you didn't want to use a drive letter. We'll click Next, and here's where we can select our file system. Now we'll make sure it's on NTFS, and we'll use the default file allocation size, as we're not formatting a volume larger than 2 terabytes. Now this volume should also have a name that's not quite so generic as New Volume, so I think we'll change it to Norm. There we go, keeping with our N theme. Click Next, and we'll just quickly confirm that our settings are correct. And once we're happy with those, we'll click on Create. And as our new volume has been successfully formatted with the NTFS file system, we can click Close, and we can move on to creating a volume on Disk 2. So if we want all the benefits of NTFS, but also want some of the more advanced features, we can create a volume with REFS, or the Resilient File System. Now it adds a host of new features, including resilience to corruption, has better performance for things like virtualized workloads, and it's scalable to millions of terabytes without impacting performance. But it's not all roses and sunshine, however. There are a few limitations, and one of those is you can't boot from a drive formatted with REFS. So, once again in the Volumes pane, we'll click on the New Volume Wizard, and on the Select Server and Disk page, we'll select Disk 2. And click Next. Now again, I think we'll create a single volume on this disk using all of the free space, so 50 gigabytes in this case. Click Next. And somewhat unoriginally, I think we're going to choose R for REFS. Go ahead and click Next. And on the file system page, we can kick that over to REFS. And you'll note we have grayed out the option to generate short file names, as REFS does not support that feature. And in keeping with our R theme, we're going to name this volume Ralph. And we'll give our settings a quick overview. Make sure they're right. Volume location, volume properties, file system, all good. We'll click Create, and give that a moment to format our volume. And now that both volumes are formatted, let's check those both out. Let's go up to the volumes on the navigation pane. And now you can see our newly created volumes are listed. Oh, but what's this? Oh, there's no file system type listed. No worries. We'll click on the right-click on the bar at the top here, and we'll simply select the file system column. There we go, that's better. So now we can see our drive letter, volume label, capacity, free space, % used, and file system for all of our disks.